Good afternoon. Thank you for coming together with us on a Saturday, today, October 17th, as part of the Los Angeles Asian Pacific Film Festival. I'm David Magdale. I'm your host today, but not the moderator, thank goodness. But thank you for coming in to C3 Converse. Every week we've been doing this since the beginning of October, every Saturday at noon, where we're bringing filmmakers from our own community to talk about what they're doing, what's going on in the world of Asian Pacific American filmmaking. Today, our chat is called Rise Up, and Rise Up are these three emerging, amazing Asian American filmmakers who happen to be all female as well, that all have films that are going to be released in the next coming months, but have played the festival circuit to immense success. And then it'll be moderated by the incredible Nanfu Wang. Before we get started, let me do some housekeeping rules and just go over some things too. So welcome to the Los Angeles Asian Pacific Film Festival presented by Visual Communications. Thank you for joining us today for our C3 Converse Artist Conversation in partnership with ADOC and OYEATMF. ADOC is a filmmaker-led national network of over 600 Asian Americans working in documentary. We are mainly filmmakers, both award-winning veterans and emerging, but also including programmers, writers, journalists, curators, funders that work to increase the visibility to support of Asian Americans in the documentary field. OYEATMF stands for Open Your Eyes and Think MF, established by myself and my colleague Vince Johnson to support films and filmmakers that may not fit within the current distribution exhibition system. Our goal has been to provide access to films that are challenging and changing the landscape of truth-telling and story creation. These filmmakers include BIPOC, LGBTQ+, and other content creators who feel that they are on the margins. So we are so pleased to be partnering together with Visual Communications and the Los Asian Pacific Film Festival to bring these talkbacks every week. So let's introduce our panel. Let me bring on first Alice Gu. Alice Gu is the director of the documentary called The Donut King. It won awards at South by Southwest. It won awards at the Bentonville Film Festival. We screened it at our Los Angeles Asian Pacific Film Festival during May. And then it will have a repeat screening next week on October 29th. And the cool thing is the film got picked up by Greenwich Releasing, and it'll be opening in theaters and in virtual cinema on October 30th. So mark your calendars if you missed it at this festival. Alice, would you turn your camera on, please? There you are. Hi, Alice. Wait. Hey. The next person I want to introduce to you is Jenny Shi. Her film is Finding YINGYING, which also premiered at South by Southwest and with a number of other festivals. The Showmaking Festival rounds. Now that everything is in the virtual, we screened it here at the LA Asian Pacific Film Festival this month. And then the film also got distribution from MTV Documentary Films. They are planning a robust awards campaign, and they are also, I'm not sure if they're going to go into theaters, but watch for this. This is about to come. It's going to be coming out. And let me introduce to you Jenny Shi. Jenny, turn on your camera. Yay. Also, our other filmmaker is Chen. Yi has her documentary entitled First Vote, which we also screened at the LA Asian Pacific Film Festival in spring. She's also been making the rounds at a number of film festivals because the film is dealing with election and the divisiveness within our own Asian American communities between people on this side and that side. This film has really been raised up in a lot of conversations. She will be premiering, her world premiere broadcast will be on the World Channel on October 20th at 8 p.m. ET, PT, wherever you're living. So look for that. Please turn on your camera, Yishen. And our moderator today is like one of the most amazing filmmakers that we have from our community. Nanfu Wang we've known her since the very beginning. She said she's been making films since her first film, Hooligan Sparrow, about 6 years ago. She had One Child Nation last week, and this week the announcement came that she was also a MacArthur Foundation Fellow We are so proud of Nanfu Wang, and we're so glad that she can join us today and be the moderator and hopefully a mentor to these three new voices that we have from our community. So please welcome Nanfu.
Hi, thank you.
Good. So I'm
Thank
going
you,
to turn my
David.
camera off. I'm going to step off at about 5 minutes before we need to end. I'll slide back in. But thank you all for joining us, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, David. You're so good at this. I don't want you to leave. um, yeah. Hi, Alice, Jenny, and E, and hi everybody who is watching. So this is a panel, but I would say it's more like a conversation. And for the people who are not on screen, if you have any question that you want to ask any of us, please write in the chat, and we will look at it and we will talk about them. And when I was first asked to moderate this panel, I immediately said yes, because they said I was familiar with Jenny's work. I saw the film before, and I watched Alice's and E's, and I had a lot of respect for your films. The three films are all very different. But when I first heard that it's the first feature of yours, and I've been there, and I remember vividly when I was making my first film, how difficult it was, and how special that film still is to me. Even today, out of everything that I've made, I still have a special feeling towards the first one. And I always joke that it's like your first child. It would never be the same. Um, so yeah, so I want to start by asking each of you to describe a little bit about the film, and for people who might not have seen it, what it's about. And also, I wanted to know what drove you initially to make the story of film. Jenny, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So my film is Finding Yingying. It focused on a case actually 3 years ago. There was a Chinese international student. Her name is Yingying Zhang. So she disappeared from the campus of University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. But the film, it's not really about the investigation and the crime. It's really about who Yingying was and how much her life has touched others. When she first went missing in the summer of 2017, I was also a student at Northwestern University. I lived in Chicago, and that was not far away from Urbana-Champaign area where she went missing. But at first, I didn't think about making a feature documentary. Really, at that time, like everyone was trying to find her. And I also put her information on my social media, like Twitter, Facebook, and WeChat, just spread the word. And later, I think a week after that, her parents arrived in the US. For the first time, they don't speak English, knew nothing about America, but they just came here to see if they could basically find her on their own. And there were a lot of Chinese students and also local Chinese residents helping the family. So I also went down and visited the family and to see what I could do. At that time, to be honest, I had the idea of maybe started documenting what's going on at that moment, because I feel like the footage might be helpful to them. At least, if I can start it documenting the places Ying used to work and used to live, that might be something special for the family, and they can bring it back to China to share with other relatives. So I pitched the idea to the family. But again, at first, it's a process of building the trust. And I just didn't want to push too hard on them. And I would say like the most of time I spent with the family was without camera. And meanwhile, I also got to know a volunteer who was a senior student at U of I at that time. His name is Shiling Sun, and he later became one of the cinematographer and co-producer of the film. So I would say like very beginning, we just, on the one hand, we were volunteers helping the family, in some way. On the other hand, we just started documenting and didn't really know what's gonna happen next. But for me, this is a story that's really relevant because like I was an international student at that time, and Yingying, she came as an international student. So I just wanted to see what I could do, and that's how I started.
Mm-hmm. That's so interesting because for me too, I think the first and second film I started making, not realizing I was making a film, not with any expectation that eventually I would turn this into a feature film. And I feel like that almost felt like an advantage at the time, because if I had known how difficult it could be, I probably wouldn't even start. I would just stop at the very beginning. And not knowing, I think in Chinese we have a saying, it's just like, if you don't know the danger, you would just be brave. So it's like the kind of blind braveness that you go ahead and make something and figure out one step at a time. I'm curious, Alice, how did you decide to make this film, and what was that like for you?
Thanks, Nanfu, and thank you, Jenny. That was so interesting to hear the background and the origins of Finding Yingying. So the Donut King, that started pretty organically with a conversation that we had in our household about donuts, actually. And we hired a new nanny. I was a new mother at the time. And my husband had brought home these pastries, and she declined. It was from like a really high-end bakery here in Los Angeles. And she said, no, thank you. I only eat Cambodian donuts. And I said, Cambodian donuts? What's a Cambodian donut? And, you know, going back and forth, she says, oh, I found a Cambodian donut shop. Oh, there's a Cambodian donut shop right around here. And I'm thinking, how did she find it a Cambodian donut shop? She doesn't drive. She's been here 1 week. I've lived here 8 years. And how do I not know what a Cambodian donut is? And one day she brings home Cambodian donuts for my husband and and we try them, and they're delicious, but we tell her, we said, these are, I think these are just glazed donuts. So what makes these Cambodian? She says, Cambodian people make them. And then we're like, okay, it's still an American donut if a Cambodian person makes it. She says, no, Cambodian donuts, this is a thing. They're less sweet, they're fluffier, they're, you know, they're better. And she says, look it up. And I decided, I looked it up, and, you know, expecting to find nothing. And instead I find all of these articles about Ted Noi and why your donut boxes are pink, and the rags to riches story of a refugee who came from Cambodia and became a millionaire 3 years after arriving in the United States in 1975. And I was riveted, and I was really touched, you know, being a Chinese immigrant myself. I was born and raised here. My parents came here in the 60s. And, you know, growing up here, you just kind of think, oh God, everything is so different. I'm like a totally American girl, and my parents, you know, in their Chinese ways, you know, there's like a little disconnect and you can't quite understand. And in researching this film and reading these articles, you know, without my parents really telling me their stories, I was able to glean insight from their immigrant stories to America from Ted's story. You know, when you first come here, you don't speak the language and you're scared, you know, and you just kind of think of your parents, you know, at least me as a teenager, you know, just someone who doesn't let me go to a party or something, but it's completely different culturally. And it just made me think a lot about immigration and place and what it means to be American. And at the time, you know, 2.5 years ago when we started this movie, you know, the conversation in America turned very different towards their attitudes on refugees and immigrants, and that immigrants do not contribute to this country, and immigrants are only here for the take, and real Americans are only white Americans. And that didn't sit well with me, of course. So this story, God, without hesitation, I just thought I had to do it. And again, I think it's like, if you don't know, then you're brave jumping in. Like, we just have to do this. And I, you know, I wasn't going to take no for an answer, and I didn't know the hurdles that were going to come ahead of me. I just knew that we had to do it. And now, exactly, in hindsight, ignorance is bliss, because if you know how hard it is going in, you're never going to start.
Yeah. At the time, were you thinking that I'm going to make a feature film, and how did the final film end up being different from the initial conception, you would say?
The initial conception in the final film, they are a little bit different. I knew that I wanted to tell a story about this man, Ted, you know, who's now 80 years old. But I knew that I wanted to use his story, you know, the small story, to tell the bigger story of immigration. And you don't have to be Asian. You know, initially I was like, oh, I totally connect to this as an Asian American. But my producer, who's Colombian, completely relates. Friends who are Persian completely relate. And even our editor, who is several generations down, Italian, but I mean, she's just American now. She says, oh God, my grandparents came from Ellis Island, you know, and started with two produce carts, and now, you know, they've got this great business here. So the way that it evolved is the supporting characters. I found them to be so rich, and I wasn't expecting that. The supporting characters who are now like me, you know, their parents were refugees and they were American. They're now Cambodian Americans and very much American, born and raised here, educated here, think like Americans, and are very different. And some are taking over their parents' donut shops and innovating in ways that are very American that their older generation parents aren't thinking of, with social media, and really engaging in, you know, audience and viewers. So that was the difference, was really engaging with the supporting cast. And I actually found them to be, you know, just as rich to the story as Ted.
Yeah, definitely. It was so heartwarming to see how this one person influenced like hundreds of people, an entire community. And after watching the film, I actually went to Google Cronut and wanted to find where there's a Cronut I can find near me.
Yeah. We'll send you one.
So Yi, hi. Can you tell us a little bit about how you found the story? One thing that struck me was how intimate you were with people on both sides, basically, and then it doesn't come across as any judgmental one way or another that you have towards them, but regardless of their, you know, political views. And I'm very curious, how did you originally find the story and how you made that happen?
Yeah, so my film, First Vote, is my personal journey traveling to America's two battleground states, North Carolina and Ohio, where I met 4 Chinese American voters from both sides of the aisle, and I followed their first time voting and electoral organizing from 2016 to the 2018 midterms. So I immigrated to the US 17 years ago, and I will actually be voting for the first time this year myself. So as a first-time voter myself, at the time, I was in the process of becoming a citizen, and I became interested in how democratic process work, you know, what is it like to be voting for the first time. So I, you know, at the time I was interested in telling stories about Asian American voters growing participation in the democratic process, particularly in battleground states and from both sides, because so I started the project after the 2016 elections. So seeing how that has really divided the country, and also my own Chinese American voters and Asian American voters, as you saw in the film, it really impacted character like Kaiser very personally. So that's how I started the project.
Yeah, and I can see how you are equally intimate with people on both sides. And what were their reactions seeing your film? And tell us a little bit of how they feel about it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, so that's what they told me. I mean, they all liked the film, and they said it's pretty, you know, it's fair and balanced. So, you know, and I mean, I think one thing about the film is that it actually allowed both sides to actually listen to each other, which is really hard during this time, to see each other on a more personal level, even though they don't agree politically, their views are so different, but they're still willing to at least see each other's views.
Yeah. So I'm curious, like during you making that film, what would you say during the production or post-production, what was the most challenging thing?
Well, like you said, it's my first film, so you know it's actually there are a lot of challenges. So I mean, getting access, finding the characters, that's definitely one of the biggest challenges. It took me about 5 months to actually find the characters. And the story really evolved along the way. So I filmed for 2 years in 2017 and 2018. I initially was thinking that I wanted to do like just, you know, go out and interview voters, different voters, similar to, you know, Chronicle of the Summer, that sort of film, but it really evolved into more character driven, like really focusing on these 4 characters. And also it's an observational style film, so I filmed a lot of footage, and so the story was really shaped during post-production. So I spent a year in 2019 editing with 2 editors, trying to find the story. And because these 4 characters, they don't know each other, they don't interact in real life. So how do I connect their stories together into a film, into one story? And also trying to figure out the role I play in the film. Should I put myself in the film, or, you know, what is my role in the film? So how much should I be in the film? So yeah, I mean, I would say like getting access, finding characters, also finding the story are probably two of the biggest challenge creatively.
Yeah, I feel Jenny probably can relate how much of yourself to put in the film, or whether you should be in the film or not. That must be a process. How did you end up being in the film the way that it is? Can you talk about the journey of, you know, finding yourself in the balance, or decide, you know, the decision of whether to include yourself or not?
Yeah, so I wasn't in the film at all at the beginning, and it was never a plan to put myself in the film, because I feel like, you know, documentary filmmakers shouldn't be in the film. Like, you should really do a documentary, like being fly on the wall, things like that. That's what I learned from school. And when I think in 2017, when I finished school, I also created a 20 or 30 minutes short student version, and I showed it at a work in progress screening in Chicago. During that version, because the only access we had at that time was the family, and we didn't have any materials about Yingying's diary, and also about her like home videos, archival footage, and also like we didn't know what the story gonna be. So it was really a portrait of a grieving family. And there were people like asking me whether we were exploiting the family, right? And why you were making this really, really sad documentary. And they wanted to know like who's behind the camera, whether you are the right person to tell the story. That was the first time we started to think about, I started to think about whether I should explain my, you know, the purpose of making this film somehow, you know, put myself in the film. But again, like, I think in the early stage and even in production, I didn't really think about like filming myself. But the good thing is I have another cinematographer who's working with me. So somehow, like sometimes I would like be in the shot. And eventually in post-production, we found that was really, you know, helpful. And later in post-production, and also like in 2018, when I visited the family in China, there were several like very intimate conversations happened between Ying's parents and me. And I feel like that's something that I cannot deliver to the audience without my appearance in the film. And the mom, sometimes she would talk to me as if I was her daughter, things like that. So the relationship was really intimate at that moment. And I feel like maybe that's something I should bring in the film, because for the film itself, I didn't want to make a true crime investigation. And it was really about who Yingying was and all the cultural differences and the language barriers and the difficulties and the hardship the family they've been going through the whole time. So that was the first time I was thinking about maybe I should, you know, seriously put myself in the film. And then during the trial, there were a lot of you know, details of the crime came out at that moment. And we also had like different conversations about who should deliver the information of the crime in the film. And I remember Nanfu and I, we had a conversation about, you know, whether it should be me, you know, eventually in the film, it's me like as a character describing the heinous crime that was committed to Yingying. We have different cuts of the film. I think in the rough cut, it was basically the prosecutor reading, you know, out the opening statement he made. But from my perspective, I just feel like it was too cold from a mere a white male voice delivering the heinous crime. So it was me, actually reading. And also, other than like me being a character in the film, it's actually me reading Ying's diary. That was also like very interesting decision. At beginning, we were casting actually try to find an actress to do the voiceover for Ying's diary, because the audience, they might be confused when they hear my voice reading Ying's diary as Ying, and when hear my voice as myself in the film. But later on, we just feel like, I mean, not we, I think we have like work in progress screenings, and the audience say that actually if it's me reading the diary, they can relate it to Ying much more than having introduce a third, another person like read the diary. And I think visual, in terms of the visual and image, we try to clarify that when it was me reading the diary, we actually see Ying's handwritings. So it's clear, who is who. Yeah, so that's basically how I put myself in the film.
Yeah, I can imagine how challenging the editing process it is with a film that's so complicated and emotional too. Which part would you say to you was the most challenging? I would say like the editing, or more of the funding part, or releasing, trying to get the film out?
Like if you ask me like before the pandemic, I would say I don't know, because for me it's my like first film, and feels like every step when I'm pushing this project forward, it was so difficult. At the beginning, it was the access, because I had so many questions about ethical dilemmas. Whether I should kept the filming like the mom crying, such kind of moments at an early stage. And at that time, I was still a student, and I feel like maybe I shouldn't be doing that, things like that. I had a lot of questions about that. And once we had, like a stable relationship with the family, we tried to like raise funds, get money to make this film, but it was really difficult. I feel like I applied to almost every grant, but I got rejections. And there were like different feedbacks. Sometimes I got feedback, sometimes I didn't get feedback. For those feedbacks, basically they were asking me, what's the difference between news, magazine, like investigation piece, like 60 minutes, and what's the difference is your story. And some were also saying that I don't see like you have the capacity to tell such a complicated and story. And they were questioning like my ethical decisions, things like that. There were a lot, because I was a first-time filmmaker, and that's a huge question. And later on, I think in the trial part in 2019, actually there were other like news media. They are also doing documentary. So basically, we kind of like we were in a race and trying to get access to certain witnesses and subjects at the same time. And we did see, the impact, them being in the like in the production with the family. We actually lost access during the trial. That's another story. But yeah, so we had a lot of like kind of like competition, things like that. And actually that documentary was released like last fall. So we will try to release the film like early this year at South by, but like they released the film earlier. And that really made us, think about, okay, here's another documentary. Like how much, like, will it really affect the storytelling of the documentary I'm making? And how are we going to like reshape the story, really make it stand out and make it different? And then, comes to the pandemic. It was devastating because South by was among the first festivals. And I think, Alice, you must have like the same feeling when you learned that South by was canceled. Yeah, I basically didn't know like what am I gonna do next. Yeah, really devastating. I'm just staying at home and reading, especially reading news about COVID, like seeing the number just going up. And I was thinking about whether like I'm safe in the US, basically. Yeah, but that's another story. And like we're so lucky that MTV bought the film. And I'm hoping that we will have a very strong release. And hopefully we can bring Ying's story and her family story to the world, and travel to more places.
Yeah, yeah. Talking about that moment when you got, the notice from South by Southwest that it was canceled, I wonder how you and Alice both, I mean, just since then, where did the film show next, and what was the journey that like you went through, accepting the pandemic was not a month, it was, even till today we're still in it. How did that affect your decisions of whether and how to put the film out, and also doing all the virtual screenings and meeting with audience this way? Alice, do you want to share what your experience?
Sure. Yeah, it was devastating. I'd be lying if if I said I didn't cry. Yeah, I went through every emotion of like, it's sad. At the time, we didn't know how big COVID was going to be, but you just know about yourself. You're just like, you put so much work into this, and as first-time filmmakers, you're so excited to go to South by, and towards the end of February, like every day, South by is like, we're not canceling, the show will go on. There's like a little bit of dread every day, but then there's also a little hope every day. So you're like, okay, come on, let's just make it to South by. We leave in like 7 days, and I'll never forget. Yeah, it was like, a lot of F-bombs were dropped from like all of us. It was actually weird. In LA, it was actually a day of a South by filmmaker like orientation, or it was like some sort of event. And we didn't know if we should go. And then we went to the event, and the event, they must have known because the event barely had any food or water. Like it was so strange. And everybody was like, it's happening, right? And about an hour later, we were canceled. So all of the devastating emotions, and then, and you just kind of fear that your film is going to be forgotten. It's going to be one of these ghost films that no one is ever going to see. It's never going to have a life. No one's going to buy it. And then at the time, like, again, the emotions, you're like, oh, it's just going to be a month. Like Sundance went off without a hitch. We're the ones who get canceled, and then everything's going to be fine again for Tribeca, and everyone else is going to have this like great festival. But no, it ended up being, it's now October and we're still dealing with it, Yeah. So the next film festival was Sun Valley, that was also canceled. I think the first time, I don't even know the first time it actually screened at a festival, it may have been the LA Asian Pacific showcase. That might have been it, or perhaps Bentonville. But it started to, I guess we just kind of got used to this space. But I will say that, it's been, pretty lonely and isolating, and I don't know about you guys, but we still haven't had a chance to celebrate. Like I never celebrated with my editors or producers or anybody, never toasted champagne. We thought we would do that in Austin. But, at Bentonville, and I think at Urban World, there were some of these like virtual happy hours, and you can meet some of the other filmmakers. And it was really bittersweet because it was so fun to meet these people from all over the world. Yet there was the huge longing to actually want to physically be with everybody and feel that energy.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like we all feel that way. I definitely had 2 or 3 dreams during the pandemic in the past that I dreamed that I was in the movie theater and woke up, and that was not true. Yeah, it was like I didn't know that I wanted it. I mean, until like I dreamed it, and the next morning I was like, oh, maybe it's the subconsciousness telling me that I really missed that part of our life and our work. And I was also thinking oftentimes, because I have friends who have their films coming out this year too, and also the debates that you go through after each festival, announcing is canceled or going online, and then you decide, do we go with this one? Do we wait? And hoping that the next one would be in person. And this wait is so long, and we don't even know next year whether it will be when next year there will be in-person festivals or just a gathering in the theater. So there is so much unknown, but at the same time, I mean, at some point I was thinking, that's basically our life, and our work is like, as a documentary filmmaker, we're constantly dealing with the unknown at every step of making the film or post-production and now release. Is things happen unexpectedly, and we have to deal with that reality and adapt. And this is a part of our life. And maybe because of that, I guess we are a little better than other professions in dealing with it, which I mean, might not be true, but I tend to think that way. And one other thing that Jenny was mentioning, and you reminded me about the feedback, and when you applied for grants, the rejections and feedback, and how oftentimes that's labeled as first-time filmmaker. Like, people have such lack of confidence in first-time filmmaker. They be like, oh, but this is your first time. Do you know how to do this, or are you going to be able to deliver? Or even the question about, how is this different, the film different from 60 Minutes? To me, it sounded a little ridiculous, because a documentary film is a film and it's different from news. Of course, they wouldn't ask somebody who has made like 2 films this question, how is your film going to be different from news? And they are asking simply because they think that is first time. And I've faced a lot of those 2 questions. Is like, are you able to edit it yourself? Are you able to film it yourself? If you are filming or editing yourself, it must be bad. And I think, to me, a lot of the times now I often say, once you get through those and you have your film out, then you will prove them wrong. And oftentimes, to me, first film is the filmmaker who would push the envelope and try something different, because they haven't been influenced or haven't done it in a certain way. So to me, that's more exciting than anything else. Yeah. So E, I'm curious. So now the election is coming again. Have you thought about making something similar or continuing that investigation, or you are done with that?
I actually have got questions about that too. Maybe there's a first vote sequel somewhere. Yeah, no, I because of everything that's going on, making production really challenging right now. So, and I've been mostly focused on doing distribution with the film, and the impact campaign around the film. So we released, so the film actually premiered at the LA Asian Pacific Film Festival in May. So since that, we've been doing more than 10 virtual festivals, and it's playing right now at the Hot Springs Documentary Film Festival. And like David mentioned, it will premiere, a broadcast premiere is next Tuesday on America Reframed. So in addition to festival and broadcast, I've also been doing more than 20 community screenings. So working with Asian American civic engagement organizations, particularly in battleground states, to host these community screenings and support their voter mobilization work this year. So that's the other part of distribution that I've been doing in terms of mobilizing AAPI voters to go out and vote this year.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's almost like another job. I feel like the year of impact campaign and community screening. It takes a lot of time. I'm curious for Alice and Jenny, like, have you thought about the next project, or are you also in the stage of trying to get the film out and maximize the impact at this moment?
I think for me, I was trying to, like recently I'm doing research about Chinese American experience or Chinese experience during the current US-China tension, and also really to see the global impact of China. For me, like I still want to keep continuing, initiate projects and keep moving forward. So that's what I'm doing right now. But I think most of the time I'm still like doing Q&A and like I'm maintaining like the website, things like that, like social media sometimes. So trying to maximize the impact of the film, definitely, and also thinking about the like what kind of the impact campaign this film can do. I think right before South by, we just started the process of make the impact strategy, but when like COVID hit, basically like it totally changed our plan. So maybe we're just waiting to see like what kind of format, of the event we can have in the maybe next year or later. It totally depends on, the situation.
Mm-hmm. Alice?
Yeah, we've been busy, as we release in 2 weeks, and this is being the first film, and, it's with movie theaters being, mostly closed, I've been pretty busy, like Jenny, doing a lot of Q&As and just trying to make the launch successful. We also have an impact campaign. Our impact partner is Refugees International. A big intention of the film was to give a human face, and to humanize refugees. In recent years, there have been very important films about refugees and the plight of refugees. I mean, this is a worldwide crisis. And there are very important films like Lifeboat, for example, that show the plight of refugees and young babies and children going overboard. But I really wanted to show refugees story and really change any preconceived notions of what people might have about refugees, in this great country of America back in the 70s. And I do believe it's still great now. It's just we're having a little bit of trouble right now. That given a chance, it's limitless. This country is incredible. Somebody can arrive here not speaking the language, not knowing the culture, not having any money, and being a millionaire in 3 years. I was a little disheartened. Our world moves so fast these days, and it was with the election coming up, and just literally last week on public radio, I heard that most voters, immigration is not an important issue to them now. It may have been a couple of years ago, and now it's really racial inequality and how they're handling COVID. But immigration and how this country views immigrants and refugees is very important to me. I feel like it is what makes us American. It is what makes America, America. So I hope that is not forgotten. So anyway, I hope people see this film and if they thought one way or about, previously about refugees or immigrants, I hope it might change their mind.
Yeah, I think that definitely came across in the film. It was just reminding us how even I liked how, some of the quotes from the politicians back then that you included about immigrants and what makes America, America, as you said. It reminded us a time that we hope that the country would look like now. And it was great to see that and be reminded that was possible. Yeah. And it was so interesting, Jenny, you were talking about that you were doing all the things, managing the website and dealing with social media. And then I think that's the things that we all have to do. Like when we were making our own first film, like I basically also, I think I remember did my own website, managed all the social media accounts, responded to all the, emails and messages and everything. And it's a lot of work, and not necessarily like the work that I am passionate about or I'm even good at. So I remember the first several months after my first film, Hooligan Sparrow, came out, and you know, on the one hand, I'm really excited. I was happy that there was a response. On the other hand, I'm dragged into adding and trying to figure out how to add a new screening on my website to have the most recent come up. And we would get some emails from the audience member from on the website, and I would get some other emails to my own personal email. And then at some point, I just realized I couldn't respond, or I couldn't just deal with all of those, and I'm really slow, and I was trying to make my second film and I got distracted so much. And eventually what I did is I set up a fake email account, and I pretend that to be my own intern, and I would, any emails I would direct to go there, and then after that, just like that would be forwarded to Nanfu. And then so like weeks later, and I was like, okay, I'm so sorry, like this. And then so just like there is a buffer of this intern, fake intern of myself for 1 week, and then I would deal with it another week later. But it was really challenging to try to make the second film, more challenging than I thought it would be after the first film was out. The most, I remember the thing that I hoped that would improve the most was funding, the part that we all were traumatized, I think, was getting rejections and everything. So I was hoping that the second film would have a better chance of getting grants, getting funded, and which was not true. And I realized that that was a false promise or hope that people tend to have. The first film, whatever it does, it doesn't guarantee the second film. And after I finished the second film, I realized finally that making the second film is sort of like the first film. You just got to do it. You just got to like go ahead and film and find a way of editing, and eventually hoping that it will be out and be released. Yeah, I'm curious, like if you look back on the process of making the first film, was there a thing that you felt proud of yourself that you had done, that you got through all those, you know, hurdles? Like what would you remember and remind yourself when you are making the next film that you've overcome?
I'm going to make a joke here and say that we're all Asian and we hold ourselves to such a high standard that it's very hard to be proud of ourselves. Oh God, I was just talking to like a Chinese American producer yesterday, and she was like, oh my God, I get it. We have to like retrain our, you know, I don't know what it, and I don't know if I'm speaking for everybody, but I feel like it is very Asian to be like, oh, it's not, nothing's quite good enough. Oh, I could have done better. And this Chinese American producer, she's like, I know, we have to untrain ourselves of that. You know, we have to, you know, she's like, you got to walk into meetings like a white man, you know, not going in like, oh God, you know, I could have done better. I could have done hard, you know, man, this sucks. I can't remember what the original question was, but sorry. I had to interject with that joke.
I guess it's the opposite of what you just said. Is like something that you really felt proud of yourself of making the first film, and something that you would, I think, remind yourself that, look, I did, like, that was really hard and I did it. And then like the one thing that you,
it's still hard, you know, even after, and this is not meant to sound ungrateful, and I don't know if it's just weirder because it's virtual. You know, on paper, the film is done okay. You know, it's won a couple of awards, and even then, it's still hard for me to say that I'm proud of any. It's weird. Yeah, it's weird.
Well, I mean, I can talk about like my experience, not like something, I just remember one of the first steps that was really difficult is I didn't know anybody in the industry, and I didn't know who to find help from. And even where to find collaborators. Like, I don't know where I could reach out, whom I could reach out as producers, as composers, as anybody. And that was before I got any grant and got into any lab or any pitching forum. So the stupidest thing that I knew how to do is I went to IMDb and I looked at a lot of films, and I went to their cast and crew and I made a spreadsheet, and I was copying, like finding each film that I liked, and made a list of who are their producer, who are their composer, who are their colorist, who are their, you know, like editor, everything. And I made a long list and go to them, okay, where could I find the email of this person? Where is that person? And of course it didn't go very far, but like I was proud of how, you know, how hard that was, and just like the length that I would go to try to make the film.
That is, that's tremendous. And I know I just said that it's hard to be proud, but then if I take a step back and let's say I'm like in a hot air balloon, 30,000 feet above the ground and like looking observationally, I think we all have a lot to be proud of, because it is freaking hard to make a movie.
Yeah.
And then now I know it is hard to sell a movie during a pandemic. And we made movies and we got into really good festivals. So again, it's hard for me to pat myself on the back, but I think we all deserve on the back.
Definitely. I think like the fact that you all made a movie and we are watching the movie and it's a great movie, that's an achievement in itself. And I think all of you have distribution. That's amazing. And yeah, David is here, and we can see the film, I think next month, next week, and this week too.
I think that's been the most amazing thing. I know you guys are like, I would say you're the, you know, product of like what we had to go through pandemic. So 2020 will not be a year that you will forget. It's something that you guys had to live through. We all had to live through it. But one thing though to remember, okay, you didn't get to go to South by Southwest. We didn't get to gather with these people, but your films kept popping through. Understand that that's the power. When South by Southwest ended, and you know, it was like, not ended, but they made that announcement. I remember we were in Los Angeles. We just got back from True Falls, and reporters were like calling, like, what do you think? What do you think? It's like, look, we just have to find another way. How do we bring these films to market without a festival? And the thing that we also were talking about was like the films that are really gonna like sift to the top will come to the top because on the merit of the film and the filmmaking. And I look at all of you on this call, all I can do is like stand up and like applaud you, because your films are so important and also they're amazing. And you check it out, look, come on, Alice, South by Southwest and Bentonville, that's all I got to say. You know, I mean, you're able to transcend outside of even, you know, within our own Asian American communities, which I think everybody who's watching this, everybody in our Asian American community should see all of these films. But I think, you know, with the Donut King, there was something about that, telling that story, the immigrant story that even a lot of us who were born here don't even understand what that is. And that was the power of your film. You penetrated that in a way that made it accessible for so many people. So I say all that to say, don't hit yourself on the back, pat yourself on the back, because you guys, all three of you, did something in this time where we didn't have that platform. But what you did though was leaned into the platform that we have now. And that's the thing that we had to do as festivals. And I work on the PR side, and on the festival side, it's like, what I like is having these things that we're doing here. And if I might make the suggestion, anytime you get invited to a panel to talk about your film, say yes. People need to see who the creators are. People need to know your stories. And I think this is the moment, if anything pandemic has taught us, is community, and is bringing all of us together in a kind of a weird way. But the folks who are interested are going to come in. The people that are going to be sharing your film with others are going to come in. So I think, you know, if anything, feel that pride, feel that proud. If you need to toast champagne amongst yourself, do that. Whatever you need to do. Look, as Nanfu said, all of you have distribution. No one's going like, oh, well, I don't know. No one's picked up my film. But, and we were in COVID, come on, that's an amazing feat. You know, the fact that Yi's film is going to be on TV next week. And then we've got Jenny being picked up by MTV, and then Alice, you're going in theaters and virtual cinema. I think if we make the best of whatever we have going. This panel is one of the best that we've had. So I just want to say thank you to all of you, just the sharing of the knowledge, the experience, and Nanfu, you've been so generous with, just sharing your knowledge and letting, everyone just hear that. So on behalf of the Los Angeles Asian Pacific Film Festival, ADOC, Open Your Eyes and Think MF, and all of the people in the audience, I just want to say thank you, because you guys took time out to share with all of us. And to everybody that's sitting in the audience as attendees, find these films, see these films, support all these storytellers. These are the new storytellers. They're going to make more. These are not one trick ponies. This is coming up, next. And Nanfu, I mean, just watching your trajectory and everything that you do and the stories that you tell, we can't wait, for the next one to be coming through. So again, and then everyone for next week, join us. I think the topic is I think we're doing a COVID topic with the ADOC COVID shorts, and then Hao Wu's amazing film, 76 Days. And if you have not seen that, see that, because MTV documentary films about that too. So they're buying documentaries. So documentaries are alive, and there they go. So it's 76 Days, and then Sarita Kurana and Kimberly Bashford from ADOC's ASEAN COVID Stories will be talking next week, noon PT this time. Again, thank you everybody, and hopefully we'll see you at the movies somehow.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Bye.
having us.
Yes.